welcome back to the Fireside. This is our third and final installment with Kurt Jacobsen, inside Fireside superstar and tattooer extraordinaire, and our friend. If you haven't seen the first two episodes in this series, you should check those out first. I will link to them below. This was one long conversation, so if you just jump in right now, you might be a little bit lost. But in this episode in particular, we're going to talk about pain management for clients, especially when it comes to sitting for multi-day sessions when you're competing at a tattoo convention or something like that. So I hope you enjoy the episode. I really enjoyed this series. I want to thank Kurt for taking the time, and I'll see you at the end.
Almost halfway through the second page, Jake, I swear, dude. Number 6 is mentality, and that does cover both client and artist. But for the sake of this part of the conversation, I'm going to talk only about the client. So most people don't spend a whole ton of time in mentality, but mentality is the framework for your potential or for your capability. So the better your language is internally, the more that you're capable of, pretty much, period. There is it's just a thing, right? So how you speak to yourself is critical even from the first moments. So same as with honest communication. Basically what I'm saying in this one is communicate honestly with yourself, not just me, because it's very easy to lie to yourself. So everybody will want to quit at some point, whether it's a 4-hour tattoo, 5-hour, it doesn't matter. They will want to quit, right? Everybody that I've ever tattooed has wanted to quit, and none of them have. And the reason for it is because we do so much preparation and so much care and caution through all this, that it becomes something that they can see or taste as possible. It will feel impossible, and then they can taste that it's possible. I might be able to get through this, right? And the mentality to get you through and to that point is something that bears a lot of focus and certainly a conversation with. Now, obviously, you can't do the work for the client, but what you can do is you can remind your client that they are metering out their battery, that they can't rely on being able to fill their battery back up, and that whatever they use is coming off the total. So we need to be careful about how we're using our energy throughout the day. And their mentality comes into play with that. How much are you paying attention, right? If your mentality sucks, then you're not paying attention to it at all, and you're not really being progressive towards it. So helping them to understand that is something that I consider to be pretty important. You want to guide your client, not just when it's rough. You want to guide them on how to back it off when it does get rough. You want to guide them when it gets rough physically, with your hands, with your mouth, with your words, with your expression, with your feeling. It can be very easy to be like, fuck you, shut up, dude, I'm trying to fucking do what I'm doing, shut the fuck up over there. And it's very important to be able to try to get onto your client's mentality. So you guys might just be in very different places. I'm mentally struggling on the decision making that I'm making, and you're struggling physically, but I have to be able to come down and see you to know what the fuck is really going on. So mentality, again, is very important for that, and it's your job to help guide with your words and with your hands that client's mentality, especially when it comes to that. Basically bring their focus back to pushing through. Breathing exercises and things like that seem hokey and cheesy, even if you do them with your client, what you're doing is you're showing the support, not talking about the support. And people can get through much harder things when they have a friend. It's just fucking true. Now, you don't need to be all fucking, there's a limit, because you need to be, like, it's the next part of my list. What I say is be encouraging, but never pandering, right? So you are not a good coach who's like, honey, you can do it all sweetie pootie. And you're also not the coach who's trying to crush them into oblivion. You are halfway in between. You are encouraging them and calling them back to the hard thing by giving them things they can productively work on to keep the time passing. So breathing exercises or focus on where their brain is in their body matters, where their consciousness is. Most people will bring their consciousness to whatever part is hurting. Our job is to, with our words and with our touch, guide their attention and focus into the farthest part of their body away from it.
Yeah, I think that's important. It's something that's not, it's not an easy kind of line to walk as far as help, with people's mentality. I sit through a lot of long sessions, or I have in the past myself, and so you want to say, when you find them getting to a point, you recognize a thing like something as simple as holding their breath, or anticipating, you're rinsing and they're anticipating the machine coming back to their body or whatever else. You say like, oh, I recognize what you're doing right now, and I'll tell you how I deal with that. But then you say that, and you're like, well, that's my solution may not be your solution. So that mentality thing is difficult. You don't want to just like tell people how to solve the problem. They kind of have to, it's an interesting conversation, because there's not like a one size fits all way to guide every client through that.
No, there's not. For sure, there isn't like one thing, and that is super like individual. It is very individual. So like, you're not trying to solve the problem for them, but people are always going to look to you to solve the problem for them. So you have to like walk them to how to explore solving the problem for themselves. And even in doing that, then their brain power is focused on that. You know what I'm saying? So as long as you can get them to understand on it and commit effort to it, you're in the right place. So yeah, again, be encouraging, but not pandering ever. And then remind them always and whenever you can, that there is an end. It goes a very long way, right? People need to know that there's going to be an end to it. They want to quit most when it feels the most hopeless. So if you're doing a 3-day fucking Saturday, that's the most hopeless that you'll feel for sure. But once you come back Sunday, you're done, because there's no way I'd come walking back in this building and not finish. I've already done 2 days. There's no way I'm not. If you walk in the building, you're good. Cool. All right. Number 7. This one is, man, I'm sad that it's so far down the list, because it's also super important, but really everything's super important that I'm talking about, even though it is very nuanced. And this one is very difficult for people because it requires even more work and more things to pay attention to. But number 7 is contact. How you touch your clients, and it's not something that a lot of people really pay attention to. I need to do what I need to do my job, and that's true. But is there a way that I could do it with less contact or with less friction? Is really what it comes down to. Friction, pulling, tightening, stretching. What I find is a lot of people bear down with their knuckles as they're holding the machine, and they end up bearing down, and that is fucking brutal over time. Like, it's very brutal. So basically, be mindful of how you touch and how you stretch. Try to do it off of inflamed skin as much as you can. And I personally do a metric fuck ton of work with my fingertips only. Now, this is way more difficult, and it requires a lot more strength, and it requires a lot more time to build it up, because it is easier to stretch with your whole palm and pull their whole fucking thing over, and then this whole area is good to go. I work small and careful and delicate for more than one reason. Damage to the skin, but also how my contact is with them. The more gentle I am, the more that client is going to be okay with me touching them, and the less that they are going to resist me. The less that they resist me, the less fatigued that they are going to be, especially when it comes to putting in 30 hours in a project over one weekend. Is like, that shit matters, and it makes up. So Fingertip stretching rather than whole hand stretching, being careful about what you're coming into contact with, being careful about resting your elbow like in their fucking riblets, right? And they're like, oh my fucking God, for fucking even 20 minutes is like agony, dude. And agony compounds or discomfort compounds. So you want to definitely pay attention to that for sure. And the next one is wiping. What I have found is every client on the world will tell you that their tattoo artist dry wipes. Every single client will say that their artist dry wipes. The thing is I don't know a single artist that wipes dry, but here's why it feels that way. We as artists, if we put too much water or moisture on our paper towel, it will clean the surface better and easier with less friction, but it creates a water pool on top of the skin that will dilute your ink. It will create a weirdness to when your ink is actually sitting on top of the surface, and it's unworkable. So most artists are working with the perfect ratio to them of how wet their towel is to remove the ink. And all of that is important, but I don't know many artists that take into consideration the client comfort or the friction level of that. So my solution has been I will be a little wetter than I want to be on my towel, and I will compensate by applying less pressure than normal when I wipe. It's difficult and it takes a lot of like control in your mental process to adapt to a new way of working to it, but significantly more comfort over the long term for the client if you're not gouge wiping.
Yeah, great. I bet there will be a lot of comments and opinions on this. Let me share. I completely agree, and I think this is an important topic.
Better for us.
My approach to this.
Oh, it's better for us. The moisture ratio, like we got it dialed in. We know how much water we need.
Yeah. I don't want an overly wet paper towel. I know exacgly how much that it takes.
That's why it feels dry. Because it's not enough water,
right,
for your client.
But what I've started to do over the last several years, I use a foaming bottle a lot. But even if I don't, even if I'm using Dr. Bronner's or whatever, if I've got a lot of ink, I'm using a dark blue. And
you're not going to like number 12.
I lay it, I lay it over I squirt the bottle directly on them. Excuse me. I wipe only with my glove. I go through with my gloved hand only, super lightly, like you're saying. I don't use a paper towel at all. I loosen everything up. When I put the paper towel on them, I do wet it, and I press it on them, and I hold them tightly. I press directly down on them. I don't rub. I press on them, and I soak, and then I lightly pull it away from them. And especially the more and more sensitive that it gets, and of course you can tell the more sensitive that it gets, but instead of wiping with a towel, I'm loosening everything up with a gloved hand that I can feel the friction, and then I'm pressing the towel. And if you've never had a towel pressed on the tattoo, it's really pretty comforting.
Especially a cool towel.
It feels good. Yeah, it feels good. And then loosen your grip and just drag the towel off. And that works really well for me, and I can tell people I can tell that they feel it, So,
how wet is your towel when you apply it for that?
Not very, because I already have soap all over the surface of the skin.
So they're cooled and wet, so it's the cold wet, and then you get that whole thing. And then minimal friction.
The towel I damp. Yeah, minimal friction. The towel I damp. I mean, if it's soaking wet, I'll put a dry towel on it and let it sit. But the pressure will soak the moisture up, and then I'll lightly drag it off. I just do it by feel. But to me, it's that it's the touch of the glove to skin, which makes them feel more comfortable, and then the pressure of the paper towel. That I think the combination of those two things on that first wipe, at least. And if I need to, I might dab, off. But
that's a good method. I like that, especially as a compress rather than like a full. You're still not going to like number 12, but we'll get there.
Okay. Okay.
Are you good with that one? Right? Contact.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Most people, but it is critical. So is number 8, which is positioning or body fatigue. So, like what you said, no client is comfortable in one position for a very long time. However, what I have found is discomfort with your body at like a point for sitting too long can be dealt with small motions or adjustments. Like when you're on an airplane or in a car ride, you're going to adjust your feet slightly to give yourself a little bit of a break. The less muscle that you have to use, the better it is, because ultimately any muscle that you're using is going to add to your fatigue, even if it's silly stuff like tensing. Everybody tenses, and again, that's why part of it is so important. But if you're tensing and you're holding yourself up, you will drain your battery that much faster because you're doing twice as much work. So, for more than one reason, I have everybody laying down as much as I possibly can. You probably have never seen me work with anybody sitting up. Maybe my wife. I think I might have worked. Not because I don't love her.
Maybe.
I don't remember. Now
Yeah.
I'm saying it, right? We were sharing a booth. It was a tight space. She's the most beautiful woman on earth, and I love her to death. There's no, not like that. But rarely will I have a person sitting up for exactly that reason. Is it will fatigue you faster, almost without exception. The more that you have to use to hold yourself up, and people automatically tense, your body automatically is resistant to damage. So whether you're tough or not, it doesn't matter. Your body is still tensing, even if it's minorly. Everybody does, and that drains your battery. Holding yourself up or being in a position that's uncomfortable just magnifies that by an order of magnitude, like literally 10 times the amount. It's huge. Same for pillows, right? I use pillows and blankets like they're going out of season, and for that exact reason. It's not as much like, hey, let me give you your fluffy cloud pillows, whatever. It's more about options for slight position changes that don't really change your position. So like a pillow under your hips allows you to put more focus on, cushioning one hip and then shift it to the other hip, or move it down your buttocks a little bit to give you a little bit break from that area. So for me, clients don't want it because they're like, I don't need no comfort. I'm fucking whatever, as they do. But I will force specifically positioning comfort and like pillow or support comfort like a motherfucker, because they're not going to do it. And with this one in particular, with positioning, body language is super critical. So if you have done your job well and you've gotten good at learning like what they're telling you and what their body is telling you is like, then pretty quickly on you should get a good read on how fatigued, how quickly they get based on whatever position that you have them in, right? So if you're doing your job well, you should be able to see how taxing the position that you have them is for them. Cool.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Let me throw a pillow tip as well. If you have an IKEA in your town, I buy these pillows from IKEA. I buy them every time I happen to pass. It's 30 minutes from my house, but I buy them every time I happen to pass by. They're $2.99, $3. They come in a tight roll, the plastic roll. And so they can be in between the knee pillows. They can be neck pillows. They're rolled up super tight. I buy a handful of them. I use them that way until I wrap them in a drape sheet or whatever. But I use them until the plastic starts to look dingy. Then I open them and I use them with disposable pillowcases as regular pillows for a period of time. Then I ditch them. So maybe I buy 10 to 15 of these pillows a year. But they're $3 a piece. And they serve multiple purposes throughout the process. So,
and that's super smart. Not that I'm trying to argue with you, but it's a lot cheaper if your client just brings their own hotel pillows. Yeah.
And a lot of them do. Yeah. A lot of them do. Yeah. Oh yeah. And we are talking about I'm talking about in my studio as well.
No, so studio. I actually have it's like a weird doll museum collection of different sized and shaped pillows for client comfort. So pillows are a big accessory in my shop for that reason. And then more so than anything else, I'm used to making a client, like forcing a pillow on a client. Every client's grateful that they have it, but every client will fight you to death to get it. Like, they don't want it. 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 They don't fucking want it. Stop asking. You give it to them, and they're like, why didn't I ask for a pillow sooner? And you're like, well,
Right.
fuck, man. So I force it, man. I force it. I force it very hard because it helps. And I like your concept. I might do that because I like the change of compression. It's going to be firmer and more compressed earlier on, and then it'll soften out, and then it disappears. And that's clever. That's clever, bitch. I like that. Yes.
It's super cheap.
I might.
Yeah, they're great.
Despite me arguing with you right away for a better way, I might try that fucking out. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, at least in your studio. I might not travel with them, but at least in the studio, I keep a lot of
Well,
stock.
for me, I just buy it once for the whole weekend. You know what I'm saying? I don't need to change it all. It's like one client. I could add it into the price. It's like, hey, there's gonna be an extra $20 for this IKEA treatment. You know, that's not a huge deal for that. Although I'm not trying to nickel and dime clients. So also be clear about that. You want to provide more value to the client in doing this, because that's what it's about. You're not there to make money. You're there to show up and show out, right? Make money because you got to make it worth it, but you're not there to like make money, if that makes sense. Okay. So positioning body fatigue. If you're ready to move on, number 9 is workflow and plan. It kind of goes in line with contact. You should have a plan for how you're going to approach that includes more than just what you want to accomplish in what time. It should be expanded or included in your brain enough to include what's most and what's least comfortable for your client, and try to tackle that appropriately as you read their battery. If they're at a fucking 70, you're better off tackling stuff that sucks really bad than if they're at 40. Does that make sense? So be aware of where they're at and try to include their comfort into part of your workflow and plan. Some things are more obvious than others, but be flexible enough to alter that or change that as you go along. Okay. Again, like what we talked about earlier, if you're being very efficient with your holds, you don't have a problem with coming back to stuff, but you want to try to come back to stuff as little as possible for your client's comfort. However, the flip side of that, the next thing that we're going to talk about is lidocaine use. Bactine in this particular case is the only one that I use, but lidocaine use is amplified the more broken that the skin is. So in your workflow plan, presumably, if you come back to something, then that skin is quote unquote most receptive to get the most efficacy out of your lidocaine use. So the more broken your skin is, the more effective, the quicker and the more effective the lidocaine is to help them reduce sensation and feel more numb. It's a cane, so it's like benzocaine, lidocaine, novocaine, cocaine. They're all in the same family, and they all produce same result because they're a narcotic more than anything else. Which brings me to lidocaine use, and I know that one's a good one for you in particular. The important things to understand for me in particular about lidocaine use is how to apply it, when to use it, where to use it, and a fundamental understanding of narcotic tolerance is really more so than anything else is the important part. So the application method, first of all, I am putting a lot of time and effort with my clients in trying to get them to go as far as possible without using anything. And I don't ever start with anything that's already numbed up. We have to get through before we can introduce lidocaine. And for every person, I will try to push that off as long as possible. So my application method is specifically trying to apply as little lidocaine as possible to help that client not feel better, but maintain where they were at. So if a client is consistently communicating that they're at a 6 and they're on their way up to a 7, my goal in lidocaine use is not to bring them down to a 3, but it's to keep them at a 6. Does that make sense? So I'm using it as little as I can to keep them where they were, not down to nothing. Make sense? So where and how you apply it are really the important factors here, right? So I suppose I maybe should add how often, where, when, and how often. So where you don't want to be applying lidocaine in any area that you're not going to directly be working in. So your lidocaine application should match your working area, whatever that might end up being. And I won't use it as a soak to numb the area. I use it personally as a supplemental wipe that gets introduced more as the client's number continues to escalate. What this looks like to an artist is that you essentially transfer your normal tattooing thing when they start to get upwards of 6s and 7s on their pain scale. That's when I start introducing lidocaine, and I adopt a 2 separate towel wiping system. It's difficult and weird to adopt because you're like, well, I just fucking one towel, or you're going to accidentally confuse or whatever, but you want to separate. You have your normal water towels, and then you have your lidocaine soaked towels. The lidocaine soaked towels are getting used at first only in the area that you're working, very carefully only in the area that you're working, and maybe 1 out of every 50 wipes. As their number slowly starts to increase, you are increasing how often that happens in relation to the rest of the cycle. So if it's 1 every 50, they start nudging up. Maybe you're doing 1 every 45. Then you're doing 1 every 40. Then you're doing 1 every 30. Then you're doing 1 every 10. Then you're doing 1 every 5. Then it's all lidocaine by the end of the day if they are desperate. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The trouble
I
is
that.
like I said, you have to adopt a 2 wiping system. And again, most of what I talk about is like adding another thing to keep track of, or another thing that you have to pay attention to. But it is, I don't know how else to explain it to you. But that's exactly the point, is that you need to pay attention to what that ratio is like, and increase like a morphine fucking button. You're increasing it gradually and with a cutoff line. It can't just be non-ending. And almost never do I soak a person in lidocaine. It's very effective. You spray the top of the area, you go back in, they're not going to feel shit. But the last point for lidocaine use in particular is your tolerance. The more that it's used, the less effective that it becomes, and that includes how much is in your system. So if you're soaking a whole thing, you're numbing areas that you're not going to work on, but you're costing a less effective lidocaine usage on the areas that are. So again, it's critical to only use it in the areas that you're going to be directly tattooing, and only in the least amounts that you can apply the skin to get away with. It becomes a game of like, the more that you're using lidocaine, the harder that you have to check in with the client, because you don't want them to feel too peaceful. Your job switches from trying to get them to feel good to trying to get them to feel uncomfortable right when you start introducing it. And it's because of tolerance. Does it make sense?
Yeah. I think that's a great explanation. And it has not been my approach.
Of course not, because
really,
why would it?
Yeah, really at all.
Once they're fucked, just make them as comfortable as possible, and that seems like the right choice. And it is for a bit, but how many people are able to walk back after you've started dumping lidocaine? It's like you'll get a little more out of them, but after a while, they're fucking full toast. And they wreck harder than anybody else. Is the people who have been doing lidocaine dumps, is like they fucking wreck the hardest. Because especially since if it's getting difficult for you and you're getting towards a 7 on discomfort, all of a sudden it's a 3. When it's a 7 again, now it's not a 7. What was a 7 is now a 9, because you loved how the 3 felt. And then when I deliver you that get back to 3, it doesn't. It only delivers you to 5. And you're like, what the fuck? It was a 3. Nope. You're never getting back to 3. That's chasing the dragon, just like with any narcotic. So you have to be very careful about how you administer it to each person. And like any drug addict, they're going to want more than you should give them.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that explanation. And I, like I mentioned earlier, I have been playing with that more and more. I have a handful, I'll say I can think of three off the top of my head, but there might be five or six people that I work on monthly, every single month. Same people, and we're doing big projects, probably three or four projects in. And they sat great. And the reason I believe what you're saying is probably true is because they sat great for full tattoos. I believe that over the months and even years, they've developed probably a tolerance to Bactine where it's almost ineffective on them now, because these are people that I knew to be great sitters. And now they're like, man, I don't know why my back is so much worse than my chest was. It's like, man, I don't either. Like, it shouldn't be. I don't know. What's the difference? Back,
They
chest, they
both
both kind of
suck, right?
suck.
And actually, chest would
Yeah.
be worse. Now,
Yeah, right.
everybody's different, and it's
Yeah.
tough to quantify with like that much
Sure.
variables. But the reason, because it actually segues into my next point 11 is ibuprofen versus Tylenol and the myths surrounding it. So to make it clear, my wife was a pharmacy technician for 10 years early on in our relationship, and so not because she wanted to, but because she was forced to, she ended up with a very good amount of knowledge that helped me to understand things accidentally better later on, like what's actually happening, what the usages are. And it's not like she's a doctor by any measure or a pharmacist, because she wasn't, but it's very difficult to not get a more thorough understanding of what's happening with narcotics, spending 10 years that close to the field. So her foundational knowledge, while I don't consider it medical advice by any measure, and she would not want anybody to think that either, she does have a pretty good working understanding of what happens in the body and normal human stuff in terms of medications, how they're applied, how long they're effective for, what their usages are, what drugs affect other drugs, lots of stuff that's really chemistry more than anything else, and that she has a very wide and very deep accidental knowledge base for, that ultimately she doesn't use now. Aside from that, she's a mother. She gave birth to four kids, and she's experienced all sorts of pain and drug use and combinations of, pain relief medications. And she's got endometriosis. And there's, like, I don't think there's a better pain expert in relation to how drugs affect pain than my wife. Plus, she's the toughest woman I know. She's got a recessive redheaded gene, and she's immune to anesthesia, actually, because of that. And so redheads are either very susceptible to opiates or the opposite, and she's the opposite. So not that I'm trying to give her like credence or trust in this, but for lidocaine and then also for ibuprofen, I've gotten a lot of understanding and information that's helped me be more educated in my experiments over the long term, that I've got a pretty good understanding for what's effective and for how long and why and that type of stuff. So I could obviously talk a lot more about all these topics, but especially the lidocaine use, because there is a lot more subtlety in that. But we'll save it for another time. Or if you have questions, meet us in the drawing group at some point in time. I'm happy to answer. Ibuprofen versus Tylenol. The myth is Tylenol is better for you, and you should not take ibuprofen during getting a tattoo. The reason that people say that is because it thins your blood, right? Understood, totally understood. But that is, again, a myth that stays or lasts because it's surrounded by a nugget of truth. Ibuprofen does thin your blood more than acetaminophen does. If you're careful and efficient with your holes, you could take a handful of ibuprofen and it will make no visible, or it's a negligible result in terms of how your blood is actually doing. What ibuprofen does that acetaminophen does not is it's an anti-inflammatory, so it reduces inflammation. Ultimately, inflammation being the thing that causes the most amount of discomfort, a healthy regimen of ibuprofen, i.e., an anti-inflammatory, is guaranteed to make your client more comfortable. Also, contrary to what people tend to think or say, it is very easy to OD on acetaminophen, like disgustingly crazy, nastily easily. It's very easy, very easy to OD on acetaminophen, which is Tylenol. If you take more than the recommended dosage, it's very damaging to your body in a way that ibuprofen is not. If you go to the hospital and you have an injury, they are almost assured to give you both Tylenol and Advil, but their pain management is always ibuprofen based because acetaminophen's primary function is a fever reducer to bring down your immune response, which, if you remember what I talked about earlier, that's your third line of defense. So really, you kind of want to keep that intact because you're not running a fever that's dangerous and melting your brain. You really don't want to reduce that fever. What you do want to reduce is inflammation, and that's ibuprofen, not acetaminophen, despite what everybody says. So for me, the important part to understand here is that you can't give medical advice. So you have to be very careful about how you discuss this with your client. But for me, what I do while I'm humanizing myself, I talk about how much it sucks for me to get tattooed and I don't like it because I'm a baby. And what I like to do is to keep a doctor recommended steady regimen paced dosage of ibuprofen for my day. So it's X per X amount of time, and I have a dosage for every amount of time that I plan to be spending getting tattooed. And I will pregame with ibuprofen. I will use it at the appropriate, first checkpoint and the appropriate second checkpoint, as it were. And that's how I get around giving medical advice. Don't give medical advice, but you can share your opinion on, what you found is effective for you. And for me, like I said, anti-inflammatory, not fever reducer, is one of the best things that you can do for your client, is make them aware of that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That's really interesting.
Yeah, most people think it's the other way around.
Yeah.
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 Now, I'm not saying I'm right or again that we're, fucking any sort of expert or anything like that. But again, I it's not just something that I just read online. This is a statistic fact. Also, it's, you have a million clients, so ask one of your firemen or your EMTs what their your nurses what their recommendation is. Talk to them and find out what their answer is, because most of them are going to tell you ibuprofen is the way to go as long as you're dosing correctly. And if you, the practitioner, are careful about what you're doing as far as causing too much trauma, you won't see really a difference in result. You may, if you're not careful about your trauma, like it may be something, but again, with the caveat that you're being careful about what you're doing, there is no notable difference in bleeding between the two.
Yeah. Yeah. I've always felt like the bleeding thing was overhyped with ibuprofen, with think about how many people have, finished the tattoo and they want to go out to a restaurant afterwards and they say, am I okay to drink after this? I've heard that it'll make my tattoo bleed out.
But the weird
like
part,
that.
again, I think it's a hypothesis, but I think a lot of that is stemmed from overcautious medical field. And overcautious medical field has to be because they only work by process of elimination. So you have to be very careful in that sort of methodology. And because of that, an overcautious attitude happens. Somebody takes it slightly out of context, and then it's adapted as that's just what it is, right? Because it's common language at that point in time. And again, I'm not saying I'm right and anybody's wrong, but what I am saying is I have, in experience, noticed a significant ability as an average for clients to sit longer by putting a highlight on this in particular without seeing any notable negative effects. And those are the two things I'm looking for. Does it add and does it subtract? And if so, by how much, right? And then that's what gives me, is this worth playing with or not? And then, like I said, I also, I listen to my wife. She's very smart, man. She's very fucking smart. She's
Sounds
very
like it.
fucking smart, dude.
Yeah,
She is,
yeah.
for sure. So yeah, dude, I listen occasionally, especially when it's something that she fucking knows about. That's it's been a long time since she did it. It's been a good number of years, but when she was in it, she had to memorize all of these drugs and what they do to other drugs and what happens to your system because she handles it, and she's not a pharmacist, but any nurse will tell you you have to know as much as a doctor to be a nurse. So being a pharmacy tech, you have to have as much knowledge as a as a pharmacist, because you're a second layer of check. So like, again, I'm not trying to like prove credentials to anybody. I don't care. But when I'm looking for what information works, I start with who gave me that information and where did they get it. And then I try to use that to set up a controlled experiment to see, is it effective? How does it, whatever the case may be. And I found that one in particular to be a game changer for both. There's only 3 more points, dude. We're almost done. I swear. I know you're ready to.
What's next? I can't wait. What is it?
Number 12. It's the one you're not going to like. And the one that surprises everybody. You ready?
Ready.
No soap in rinse bottles or as cleaning, right? Soap, it's designed to remove debris. As you said, a little soap, friction is more what gets bacteria off, but soap's goal is to break up, right? Do you want that on a wound? Like in terms of in relation to discomfort, soap is an irritant. More than anything else, what it does is it gets in there and it causes, by its intended nature, disruption at the surface. So I do not use soap in my rinse bottles.
Only wipe with water.
Yeah.
Okay.
Water. Yep.
Yeah.
Now, there are times where I will need to, because things are just, whoo, right? Skin is absorbing too much pigment in the little crackies, or who knows. And also, as a caveat, with Bactine use, if you're not familiar, the more that you use Bactine on the top of your surface, it starts to act like a weird adhesive, and your ink sticks to the surface more than it does if you're using just water. I don't know if you've noticed that or not, but heavy usage of Bactine creates like an adhesive to it, and so you'll find yourself wiping more or needing to clean more or whatever. And again, it's back to planning. But for me, don't use soap, because it will immediately decrease redness, because it's not
decrease redness.
Yeah, because it's not as irritating to your skin.
Oh, okay.
Because that's what soap is for, is literally to break things up and to get it off the surface. And that chemical reaction, that response, its intended purpose is literally causing problems. Not problems, but, friction, discomfort, irritation.
It's, that's funny. I'd be interested to hear, to hear more on that and to get other people's opinion. I have too many Nalgene bottles. I wipe mostly with water. If I had to say, the majority of the time I wipe with water. I use Dr. Bronner's peppermint soap at the beginning of the tattoo because when I shave, it provides a smooth surface to shave the skin. I use it when the stuff gets really messy with my wipe before we take a bathroom break, because it cleans everything really well. I use S8's red soap. It's like in a kind of an astringent type of thing. It really seems, it really feels like it makes the skin kind of squeaky clean. And there is the reason I don't use Dr. Bronner's, by the way, isn't for the reason that you're saying, because I haven't heard that before, but because I don't like slippery skin whenever I'm trying to stretch, and Dr. Bronner's makes the skin slippery. So I only use it at a handful of, at the beginning of the tattoo, if we're going to take a break, and then maybe again at the very end of the tattoo. So if I am going to use soap, otherwise I use that S8 red soap, which I like. There was a point in time where I knew more about it when I was closer with S8 and Sean Bellina and that group of people. And he has some beliefs about what's important about that red soap throughout the tattoo process.
And probably valid within its context. But it depends, right?
Yeah. I'd be interested to hear. I'd love to do a deeper dive on just soap in general. But Dr. Bronner's S8 red soap, Bactine, and water.
That's too much. That's too much, bro.
Tattoo.
I have one bottle. You've seen me tattoo. I have one bottle. And if I'm forced to, right, depending on where I'm at in client management, I'll bust out a second one for Bactine. But that's, I don't want it. I don't want it there because I'll be tempted to use it, right? So by way of example, at a convention, I pre-prepare towels, like not the night before, but like instead of like I'm doing one towel and wiping, I'm gonna make it's laughable because I'll make a fucking mountain of pre-folded, perfectly stacked little columns of fucking pre-wet towels, right? Just fucking all ready to go. When I do that, I use 8 times the amount of towels that I normally would because I'm like, fuck it, that one's dirty enough. You know what I'm saying? Type of situation. It's the same with soap in my bottle. The more available it is to me, the more I'm going to lean on it to be like, no, I need to get it all super clean to see what I'm doing. And the next thing you know, I'm going to be doing it 8 times in a thing. And each additional one is creating extra irritation, and therefore extra inflammation, which is redness and swelling, and therefore extra discomfort. So if I use ibuprofen well and I use soap, I'm probably going to cancel themselves out and end up neutral, give or take. I'm trying to add, so I'm like, man, so I'll just, as much as possible, and then keep my discipline and being like, work messier for longer and trust yourself, rather than I need to see it before I fucking move on, because you can't see shit anyways, you know that. You can't see shit anyways. Why do you need a clean? You can't see fucking shit. You have to trust what you're doing. You have to trust where that edge is and how that mark. You can't see it. It's all pooled up in there. It's a fuck pile. As soon as the needles touch, you're like, fuck, I can't.
Yeah.
Goddamn, right? You got to.
Yeah.
So
it's all trust, anyways.
you got it. And so putting the effort into leaning on that by removing the soap is an additional, even though it's not the intended purpose. Again, one thing helps more than one thing, but it will make you more efficient and more disciplined just by doing it. And so it helps doubly, not just singly. But for me, no soap in my fucking rinse bottles, just water, and I use it as little as possible for that reason. Efficiency of holes, coupled with minimalizing irritation and trying to bring down swelling as much as we can, because that's the goal. Those 3 things, that means my tattoo heals pretty damn close to how it's applied. Pretty fucking close.
Interesting. Yeah, that sounds like something that would be a lot more fun to explore, and we should do this as a panel at Paradise this year about some of these. Like, that'd be a lot of fun.
Yes. Yeah, I'd love to. I'd be honored to. And I'm happy to share it, more so just because if I had somebody to spend 3 hours and break all this stuff down, I could have saved myself 7 years. I could have saved myself 7 years and been like, oh shit, and then just apply the disc and you're done. It probably would have taken maybe 2 instead of 7. And that's a big deal. Or at least, if not that, if it doesn't save somebody time, maybe it helps somebody understand why they should apply the courage and go for it if they're the right person, I guess, maybe. But either way, I find it beneficial enough to share. So
I'm glad
for
you
sure.
did. Yeah, that's great.
2 more,
right,
dude.
Let's do
2
it.
more,
What are they?
I swear. And then there is a last note. So 2 more and then a last note, and then I swear I'll shut the fuck up. The last one, I am reiterating, it is take care of yourself. The last one is take care of yourself. Know your limits. We talked about, I've reiterated a million times, but what that really means is, again, you have to be honest with yourself about what your limits are and how far past that you're able to healthily do for the gain of growth, right? Pushing past your comfort is where the gain and the growth is. Pushing too far past it is where injury and failure is. So you have to get good at being like, honest enough with yourself to know exactly where that is, and always keep yourself right on that razor's edge of pushing yourself hard but not too hard. So take care of yourself, communicate with yourself, and train appropriately. If you find yourself in a situation where something got too hard, you're close to a whatever, it's too much pushing, mentally it's too hard, whatever, you need to back yourself up all the way enough, re-engineer the process to know where it went wrong for you, and therefore where you need to get stronger. And it's different for everybody. Your body might fail before your spirit does. Your spirit might fail before your client does. Your client might fail, whatever the case may be, but they're all variables, and you need to be honest with yourself in order to give yourself the best training that you can. And then when you do, train yourself well enough. What I like to say is, as anybody who trains knows, the harder you train, the easier the hard thing is when it comes time. So if I train harder than what the event actually is, when I do it, it's easier. It just is. And there's no way around that. So when you communicate with yourself, plan your training based on your own honest communication of how you're doing. How are you doing? Be honest with yourself. Okay. Last point on that one, which is hypercritical and super important for people to understand. The most important out of that, the take care of yourself thing, is that there is no failure. It feels like it, but there is no failure. I heard this thing that was like, if you ask somebody what a failed marriage is, they're going to tell you it's like when a marriage ends. If it doesn't work, then it's failed, right? But a relationship that sucked that you get out of and you're now finding something that's a good relationship, I wouldn't call that a failure, right? So defining the word failure is the most important part of being able to deal with taking care of yourself. Because if you feel like it's a failure, if you speak it in your mind that it's a failure, it will be. But failure doesn't exist. It really, truly doesn't. And if you could understand it, then you'll be okay, or you will be taking care of yourself in a way that prevents damage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a whole podcast or Mindset Monday on its own. That's, I think,
Of course
important.
it
Yeah.
is.
Important
Of
point.
course, yeah, dude. You could spend. That's why I said, dude, when you asked, and I wrote this out, I was trying to text you earlier to be like, dude, I don't think you understand. I have legitimately 7 to 9 hours of material. I could boil it down to 5 hours. It's going to be tough to boil it to 3, and I'm going to try to boil it down to 2, and there's no fucking way, because this is 7 to 9 hours of material easily without even you asking like a ton of questions about it. There's a lot to it, man. And you can't really talk about only one thing and not the other thing, because it's one bundle. So I'm doing my best to distill it, and then if you want to explode it, you can, and I'm happy to talk about any of them. But the last one, which is kind of lined up with the taking care of yourself, or the mentality with yourself, is paralysis slash avoidance. And we all understand analysis paralysis, but we don't understand how that relates to your own internal fatigue or belief system within yourself. Analysis paralysis is only triggered by how you're speaking to yourself more than anything else, or if you're at a breaking point of exhaustion, right? So anybody who does anything that's so hard it's going to bring you to physical exhaustion, where your body can't, hitting the wall like a runner, is going to tell you your training is what's going to keep you going past decision making. And tattooing a 3-day project, even me, as well experienced as I am, it's not like I've done it that much. You think I've done it a lot. I've only done, I mean, it's still a lot, dude, don't get me wrong, but I mean, I've maybe done a 3-day project not more than 15 times. You know what I'm
It's a
saying?
good
I
bit,
do it
though.
all the
Yeah.
time now because it feeds itself, but it took me so long to build to it, or even the capability to do it, which is my point. Paralysis happens to me every single time that I fucking do a tattoo, whether it's a one tattoo, all day tattoo of the day, it doesn't matter. I am going to mentally exhaust myself to the point that I am not going to make good decisions. I need to be aware of when that happens, and I most importantly need to avoid avoidance. So most of us, when things get really hard, we find ways to avoid it. Oh, if the face is really hard on this piece, I'm gonna do the snake first, because like you gotta know what the snake's doing before the face. And then, you know what? Let me do the flowers first, because those are also right, and you're just avoiding what's difficult because of paralysis. And the longer and the more exhausted that it happens, the harder that it becomes, and it leads straight into confirming all the feelings of imposter syndrome, discouragement, and all the things that we talked about earlier. It's a death trap. So Since I know that I am going to hit it, one of two things has to happen. Either my training has to kick in, where all of my decision making is pre planned and on muscle memory that I don't have to do it, or my awareness needs to be so good that I have, number one, saved enough of my own battery to jumpstart myself with a snack or a rest or a whatever, that I still have enough in there. And then also the discipline to know when that has to happen, because just like with a client, if I'm below 30%, there is no coming back from that. You got it. And if you're in paralysis or if you're in avoidance, it's pretty much a guarantee you're below 30%. So you haven't tracked yourself, you haven't watched yourself, or you're at the end of the game, because I will run myself to zero every single time. It doesn't matter. But whether a tattoo took me 10 hours, 5 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours, 25, 45, it doesn't matter. I run myself to zero because I am metering out my energy and my ability, which includes decision making. And that's why I put it on here, is because paralysis is all about decision making. If you want to engineer a circumstances where you can get past difficult decision making, it's either preparation or discipline. There isn't another way around it. So it needs to go one of those two directions, and you need to know that you can't avoid it when you're competing. No matter how well practiced or how well trained you are, you will hit it, because it's not that easy to know exactly what your battery is, and you'll surprise yourself, just like your client will surprise themselves, which is why communication is so important, checking in.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great one. That's a great one to wrap it on. There's something that we talk about in strategic coaching a bit that Dan Sullivan calls the procrastination priority, and it's basically, the things that you're procrastinating on are actually your biggest potential breakthroughs, and if you recognize those, you should just go on and tackle those first. And I use it. We've talked about it in the club a lot. That I use a Trello board that I work off of each day, and I flip through. And there are certain things that I do each day. I draw when I first get up every morning while I'm having coffee. I draw first. We watch the same news channel, and I draw and I drink coffee, and then from there, I look at the thing that I'm regretting, or that I'm not regretting, that I'm putting off, that I'm procrastinating on the most. The one thing that I don't want to do, if I can bring myself to knock that out next, the day cascades. If it stays on that board, the day drudges along.
And that's your
So
only focus. You can't really get, weirdly, it becomes your only focus is the thing that you're trying to avoid. All of your energy becomes avoiding the thing, you know? So a simple way that I like to say it to myself is, don't get through it, get to it. Right. So, like, whatever you're trying, don't be like, let me just get through this thing or get past it or get around it. Let me get to the fucking problem that is the most difficult. And it does, to a degree, go back to the deer hunting analogy, is I'm eager to find the thing that is more difficult to make myself better. Oftentimes, you will find the biggest progress or the most helpful thing right in that fucking sweet spot, even though it sucks. So being aware is the best thing that you can do for exactly what you're talking about: procrastination, paralysis, or, yeah, dude, priority, right? Because they end up being the same thing. You're procrastinating. If you spend all of your energy in procrastination, you're spending all of your time in the task, just not moving forward with the task. It's the craziest fucking thing, right? It's the craziest thing. And it's very easy and sneaky. So, like, again, I hate that this list has to be prioritized like that, because I might put it higher for that reason. It's an ender, it's a closer, it's a finisher for sure, but it's tough, and it's universal. Everybody fucking has it. At some point in time, you question your decision making. That's why they call it the ugly phase. You've done something, it's either good and you don't want to ruin it, or it's already ruined it and you feel like you can't save it and you'll just ruin it more. Either way, you're going to start avoiding. And when you start avoiding, you're off plan. When you're off plan, everything gets fucked. Yep.
Yep. Yep. I think it's fitting that it's a
Oh, I do have a
closer
last note. Sorry.
because so many of us. Okay, yeah, but as a
Yes.
closing, whatever, close to a closer, I think it's fitting that it is, because so many of us, probably all of us, who work on large scale designs are always, even if it's not a major piece of the puzzle, we're always putting something on. Like, there's some piece of every big tattoo that you're putting off to the next session, and it always ends up at the end becoming a thing that you have to deal with or incorporate with, no matter how minuscule it seems. There's always a thing. The color of the koi's eyes, like what the leaving the eye open, like which way is it is it looking down at the lotus or is it looking up at the thing? Like there's always something that just starts to take up more space in your brain than it ever should have, And it's like, it's one of those things where it's progress over perfection, where you're just like, just make it look some way. Like make it whatever make it whatever it is.
And
decide,
then commit
do
100% to it, whatever it might end up being. So like I think you had mentioned before, but like I make almost all my decision making on the fly. It's part of my process. I'm not going to talk about that in this because it is, again, a whole extra other level of difficulty. I choose to do it for a lot of reasons. I won't really get super into it, but one of the biggest benefits is that it helps with analysis paralysis. If I am constantly trying to make good decisions with short notice, then I'm really good at making good decisions in short notice. And that comes into play quite often, surprisingly, in our job. Yeah. Simple as that, right? Yeah. It's my biggest thing against AI is like AI will make your job easier, which will make you not want to pursue the thing that's more difficult, that's going to make you better, fundamentally better as a decision maker is really what it is our whole job is problem solver, which really means decision maker. That's what it means. And so like, I don't want to outsource that job to anything. I want to keep that in-house because that's how I fucking get better for me personally. And I'm not trying to talk about AI too much, but in relation to that, almost every part of my procedure, mentality, process, whatever is, make it harder for myself so that I get better. And that's difficult. It is for sure. Last note, which is super important. You don't have to be in the Olympics to enjoy a sport. However, challenge makes everything more interesting for a longer period of time. If you don't believe me, your favorite video game, as soon as you get the cheat codes for it, is the most uninteresting that has ever fucking happened in ever, right? So challenge is what makes things more interesting, and competition, even if you don't go out and compete for trophies, really what you're doing is you're competing with yourself. So even if you don't go out and trophy chase for any reason, I think it's a beneficial thing for people to be in healthy competition with themselves. Again, it requires a lot of work, but you shouldn't be trying to prove something to yourself because you don't believe it. You should be trying to prove something to yourself because you want results of the progress you're trying for. Does that make sense? Whatever it might end up being. So the mentality behind it matters a hell of a lot, but you don't have to be in the Olympics to enjoy a sport. You don't have to compete. However, the challenge and the spirit of it promotes engagement with yourself. It helps purpose, and it helps to have weight to everything that you're doing within your day and within your weight. And most importantly, clients feel it too. Regardless, no matter what it is, even if you're not at shows getting trophies, if you're actively in competition and challenging yourself, your client can feel it before you ever open your mouth or before anything happens, because they want you to care a stupid amount. That's what a client wants. Ultimately, that's what every client is looking for. Even the shitty ones that don't want to pay your rates or anything, they are still looking for somebody to care far more than they do. So, commit to yourself first. Forgive yourself any mistakes that you make immediately, but stay committed. And that's it. It's my last note.
Hey, thanks again for watching. I really hope you got something out of this series. Again, thank you so much to Kurt. I would love to have you, and so would Kurt, in the Inside Fireside Tattoo Club. I'll make sure to link to it. You can click one of these buttons here and learn more about it. Kurt leads our Friday night drawing groups, and he's awesome. I say leads our Friday night drawing groups. He's on the stream drawing on Friday nights, and if you have any questions, he is great at critiques. He's happy to do portfolio reviews, and so am I. I'm on the drawing streams quite a bit as well. So if you are looking for some feedback, if you're looking to grow your drawing skills or just have fun tattoo-related conversations, make sure to check us out inside Fireside Tattoo Club. Link is, somewhere around here. You'll find it. Thank you, as always, for supporting what we do, and we'll see you next time.